The 7 signs you're being understanding to the wrong people. Alright, picture this: you're sitting there, trying to be understanding, compassionate, and patient. You're giving people the benefit of the doubt, because that's who you are. You're the kind of person who sees the best in others, right? But what if I told you that sometimes, just sometimes, you're being understanding to the wrong people? And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today, the 7 signs you're being understanding to the wrong people. Now, before we get too deep, let me ask you, have you ever felt like you were giving and giving, but nothing ever changed? Like you were pouring your energy into someone or something, only to realize you weren't getting anything back? That's not just a frustrating feeling, it's a signal. A signal that maybe, just maybe, you're being understanding to the wrong people. But why does this happen? Why do we end up giving so much of ourselves to people who don't reciprocate, or worse, people who drain us? It's because we've been conditioned to believe that being understanding and compassionate are always virtues. And they are, most of the time. But here's the twist: compassion without boundaries isn't compassion, it's self-sacrifice. And sometimes we end up sacrificing ourselves for people who don't deserve it. You might find yourself constantly making excuses for their behavior. Oh, they're just going through a rough time, or they didn't mean it, they're just stressed. But when someone consistently treats you poorly, their stress, their problems, or their past trauma isn't an excuse. It's a reason to be understanding once, maybe twice. But if you're constantly rationalizing someone's bad behavior, you have to ask yourself, am I excusing them because I'm understanding, or because I'm afraid to face the truth about them? When you're being understanding, you expect that at some point the other person will recognize their mistakes, right? They'll own up to their behavior and make an effort to change. But here's a harsh truth: some people never take responsibility. They'll use your understanding nature to avoid accountability. Deep question time: how many times have you let someone off the hook because you hoped they'd eventually take responsibility? And what happens when they don't? If you're constantly feeling drained, exhausted, or emotionally depleted from a relationship, that's a massive red flag. One of the most profound truths I've learned is that real understanding should energize you. When you're in a healthy relationship, whether it's a friendship, family, or romantic relationship, being understanding should lead to growth for both people. But if you're the one always feeling drained while the other person seems to thrive off your energy, you're giving too much to the wrong person.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to set a boundary with someone only to have them make you feel guilty about it? Maybe they act like you're being selfish, or they try to manipulate the situation to make you feel like the bad guy. If someone can't respect your boundaries, they're not respecting you. Being understanding doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means being compassionate while also protecting your own well-being. You know that person who only seems to contact you when they need a favor or when they're in a crisis. And because you're understanding, you always jump in to help. But here's the kicker: they're never there when you need something. Ask yourself, are you being understanding, or are you being used? There's a fine line between the two, and it's easy to blur it when you care about someone. But if the relationship is one-sided, it's time to reevaluate. You've been understanding, patient, and hopeful. You've invested so much time into this person, thinking they'll change. I just need to give them more time, but here's the brutal reality: some people never change. And the more you wait for them to become the person you hope they'll be, the more you lose sight of who they really are. Here's a philosophical question for you: how much time are you willing to spend waiting for someone else to grow when you could be growing yourself? If you find that you're losing touch with who you are, your values, your goals, your happiness, because you're so focused on being understanding to someone else, you're being understanding to the wrong person. You should never have to sacrifice your own sense of self for the sake of someone else's comfort. Being understanding should never come at the cost of your own identity. Now, here's where it gets tricky. You might be asking, but isn't understanding and compassion what makes us good people? And the answer is yes, but only when you're giving it to the right people. There's a difference between being understanding and being taken advantage of. And the key is knowing when to walk away. So, take a moment to reflect. Who in your life are you being understanding to? And more importantly, are they deserving of that understanding? It's a tough question, but an essential one if you want to preserve your emotional energy and your sense of self. When compassion becomes self-betrayal, how to recognize the fine line between caring and losing yourself. Let's talk about the fine line between being compassionate and betraying yourself. Compassion is a beautiful thing, right? It's what makes us human, what connects us to others. But what happens when your compassion starts to cost you more than it should? What happens when, in the name of understanding, you begin to lose sight of your own needs, your own boundaries? That's when compassion turns into self-betrayal, and recognizing this shift is crucial if you want to maintain a healthy sense of self. Think about it. You've probably been in situations where you felt like you were giving so much of yourself, thinking that your kindness would eventually be reciprocated. You believe that if you just hang in there, if you just keep being understanding, things will change. But here's the uncomfortable truth: not everyone deserves your compassion. Some people take advantage of it. They see your kindness as weakness, your patience as permission to continue their behavior. And the longer you allow it, the more you betray yourself. Here's a deep question for you. How many times have you prioritized someone else's comfort or happiness at the expense of your own? If you're honest, you might find that you've done this more often than you'd like to admit. But why? Why do we feel the need to put others before ourselves, even when it's clear that they wouldn't do the same for us? Part of it is cultural. We're often taught that being a good person means being selfless, that we should always give, even when it hurts. But here's the thing: selflessness without boundaries isn't virtue, it's self-erasure. It's the slow, quiet process of disappearing in the name of being good, and what's left when you've given so much that there's nothing left for yourself. It's important to understand that compassion and self-respect are not opposites. In fact, they should work together. Compassion without self-respect leads to burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Real compassion includes compassion for yourself. It's about recognizing that your needs, your feelings, and your boundaries are just as important as anyone else's. In fact, they should come first. Because if you're constantly putting yourself last, you're sending a message to the world and to yourself that you don't matter. Here's another question to reflect on. When was the last time you said no to someone, not because you didn't care, but because you cared about yourself more? If that feels difficult or even wrong, it's a sign that you've been conditioned to believe that your needs are less important than the needs of others. But here's the truth: saying no is one of the most compassionate things you can do for yourself. It's an act of self-preservation, a way to protect your energy and well-being. And let's be clear, setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it makes you a healthy person. Boundaries are a form of self-respect, and they're essential for maintaining any kind of healthy relationship. If someone can't respect your boundaries, they're showing you that they don't respect you. And that's a clear sign that you're being understanding to the wrong person. But here's where it gets tough. Sometimes, the people we need to set boundaries with are the ones we care about the most: family members, close friends, or even romantic partners. It's easy to think, but I love them, or I've known them for so long, I can't just walk away. But ask yourself, this is your love for them worth the price of losing yourself? At some point, you have to realize that continuing to be understanding, compassionate, and forgiving isn't serving you, it's hurting you. And here's the kicker: if someone truly cares about you, they won't make you choose between them and your well-being. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll understand that your compassion doesn't mean you're willing to be their emotional doormat. So how do you know when to stop being understanding? It's simple. Really, when your compassion costs you your peace, it's no longer compassion, it's self-betrayal. The moment you feel like you're losing yourself in the process of caring for someone else, that's when you know it's time to take a step back. You don't have to cut them off completely, but you do need to reassess the relationship and set firmer boundaries. Remember, compassion is a two-way street. It's about reciprocity, mutual respect, and shared understanding. If you're the only one giving, while the other person continues to take without any regard for your needs, you're not in a healthy relationship. You're in a situation where your kindness is being exploited, and it's up to you to stop it. Let me leave you with this: who in your life is worth your compassion, and who is costing you your peace? It's a hard question, but one that you need to answer if you want to preserve your emotional well-being. Compassion is powerful, but only when it's balanced with self-respect. The cost of emotional investment: how to protect your energy without losing your humanity. Let's dive into something most of us don't think about until it's too late: the cost of emotional investment. You see, every time you give your energy, time, or compassion to someone, you're making an investment. Just like with money, emotional investments come with risks, and some of them can leave you bankrupt if you're not careful. The key is learning how to protect your energy without shutting yourself off from the world. Because let's face it, you don't want to lose your humanity in the process of guarding yourself, right? Here's the tricky part: when we care about someone, it's natural to want to invest emotionally. We listen to their problems, we support them through their struggles, we celebrate their victories. But not all investments pay off. Sometimes we give and give, only to find ourselves emotionally drained, while the other person continues to take without giving anything back. And that's when it becomes dangerous, when your kindness starts to feel like a burden. So, how do you protect your energy while still being a compassionate, caring person? How do you stop yourself from being drained without building emotional walls so high that no one can reach you? This is where balance comes in. You have to learn when to invest and when to pull back. And that requires one very important thing: discernment. Think about it: how many people in your life do you invest in emotionally, and how many of them actually give back? It's not about keeping score, but about recognizing when a relationship is draining you more than it's fueling you. If you're constantly feeling depleted after interactions with someone, that's a sign you're over-investing. Emotional investment should be a two-way exchange. When it's one-sided, you're essentially giving away parts of yourself with nothing in return. Here's a deep question for you: is your emotional bank account running on empty because you're investing in people who don't value your energy? If the answer is yes, it's time to reevaluate where you're placing your compassion. You have to start thinking of your emotional energy as a precious resource, because it is. And just like you wouldn't throw money into a bad investment, you shouldn't throw your emotional energy into relationships that only drain you. But here's the challenge: how do you protect your energy without becoming cold or detached? How do you set boundaries without losing your ability to care? The answer lies in intentionality. You don't have to stop caring, you just have to be more intentional about who you care for and how much you give. Not everyone deserves the same level of access to you, and that's okay. It doesn't make you selfish, it makes you wise. Think of it like this: you wouldn't leave your front door wide open for anyone to walk in, right? You'd lock it, but you'd still let people in through the door. You'd just make sure they're people you trust. The same goes for your emotional energy. You need to guard it, but you don't have to shut it off completely. The goal is to open the door for those who respect and value you, while keeping it closed to those who drain or exploit your kindness. So, here's what I want you to reflect on: who in your life has earned the right to your emotional investment, and more importantly, who hasn't? It's a tough realization, but once you protect your energy, you'll find that your compassion becomes even more powerful, because now you're giving it to the people who truly deserve it. The art of letting go: how to move on from toxic relationships without losing yourself. Letting go, it's one of the most challenging yet liberating things we can do. The idea of detaching from someone we've emotionally invested in can feel like a betrayal, not just of them, but of ourselves. It's hard, right? You've spent time, energy, and compassion on this person. Maybe you've even built your identity around being the understanding one in their lives. But here's the truth: sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is let go, not just for them, but for yourself. The problem is that we often fear what letting go means. We fear the void it will leave, the uncertainty of what comes next, or the guilt of abandoning someone. But here's something to consider: what are you abandoning when you continue to hold on? More often than not, by clinging to toxic relationships, you're abandoning yourself, your peace, your growth, your joy. Ask yourself, how much of my emotional well-being am I sacrificing by staying in this relationship? When the answer is too much, it's time to move on. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you erase the memories or disregard the lessons learned. Letting go means you recognize that the relationship has reached a point where it's doing more harm than good. You can care about someone and still acknowledge that their presence in your life no longer serves your highest good. And that's hard to accept, but it's essential for your emotional survival. The first step in letting go is understanding that it's not about them, it's about you. It's about recognizing your worth and realizing that you deserve relationships that uplift you, not ones that drain you. You deserve people who respect your boundaries, appreciate your compassion, and contribute to your growth. Staying in a toxic relationship, whether it's a friendship, a family dynamic, or a romantic partnership, only keeps you stuck in a cycle of emotional depletion. But here's a key point: letting go isn't about cutting people off in anger or resentment. It's about releasing them with love and understanding that their journey is separate from yours now. It's about freeing yourself from the emotional burden of trying to fix or save someone else. Because here's the reality: you can't save someone who isn't willing to save themselves. The moment you let go, you create space in your life for better things to come: better relationships, better opportunities, and most importantly, a better relationship with yourself. So, ask yourself, what am I holding on to that I need to release? And how would my life change if I finally let go? The answers might surprise you, and they might just set you free. Letting go isn't the end, it's the beginning of reclaiming your energy, your peace, and your sense of self.